fruition. I got bars and eights, but never in a prison. Too far gone, never gonna sit and listen. This is optimism mixed with the best. You get it? What you're seeing is a beast in the flesh. I'm vetted. I don't need to try to speak for the...
Hey folks, MCU'S Bleeding Edge YouTube channel and podcast. Friday, 1/24/2025. Here to live stream review. We Were Soldiers. When did We Were Soldiers come out? 2002, I believe. With me, my co-host Cyberneticshark. What's going on, Cyberneticshark? Good to see you. What up, middle-aged Tim?
How's it going, everybody?
And of course, Ben Bills. Usually he's just Ben, but now he's Ben Bills. Ben's back. It's been a long time. Good to see you, Ben. Always good to see your face, brother. Good to have you back in the fold. So we're here to live stream review We Were Soldiers. Classic. I guess you could say that it's a classic, war film at this point. It's got 20 plus years, behind it since when it first came out. Basically, We Were Soldiers is a 2002 American war film written and directed by Randall Wallace and starring Mel Gibson, based on the book We Were Soldiers Once and Young by Lieutenant General retired Hal Moore and reporter Joseph L. Galloway. It dramatizes the Battle of La Drang on November 14th, 1965. Joseph L. Galloway is the reporter guy in the movie, and obviously Hal Moore is like the general, the major or whatever, in the film. So first question, guys, I'll go to you first, Ben. How many watches are you on with, including this one for We Were Soldiers? And what was your first impression the first time you saw the film?
I actually grew up watching this movie. I watched it the year that it came out. And my first impression was it was a very solid war film, very well written, very well acted. It's intense. It's realistic, which I grew up in a military family, so this was one of the staples, like Saving Private Ryan, this one, and a few other war movies that I grew up with, and this is probably one of my all-time favorites. I've honestly lost count of how many times I've watched this movie, but as a teenager, whenever my dad would catch me watching this movie, he'd quiz me on different parts of the battle, like breaking it down, what Colonel Moore was doing at the time, like what he was thinking, that kind of thing. Like he would be like, "What you doing, Ben?" And if I got it wrong, he'd make me do push-ups. So,
wow. Well, that is, you know what? That's a great story, Ben. Thank you for adding that to the live stream. Cyber, same question to you, sir.
I saw this in theaters back in 2002. So I got to see this on the big screen, which was phenomenal. And this has got to be one of my all-time favorite war films, too, as well, just like Ben. I probably have seen it a dozen times over the last 23 years, and including today, today and yesterday's watch. And it actually had been a while since the last time I had seen it, so it was kind of a refresher course for rewatching it again. And I forgot how amazing this film was. So it was really fun to rewatch it. Because this is such a phenomenally done film. Just like Ben said, it does it so accurately and gives you a really great depiction of what it was like, that first battle in the Vietnam War, for us going over there. And, I think that Mel Gibson did a great job of portraying, Captain Moore he was just a very amazing man. And like I've always say is, soldiers really are true men. And I really, they really do pull together what a true man should be. So I think that this great honor of this story, that this movie is based off of the book that him and that Calloway guy put together. I think they did a really good job of giving us exactly what they meant when they wrote that book. So I think it's a really fun film, really well done, and one of the best war films out there.
Budget was $75 million. It says the box office was $115.4 million. So didn't exactly recoup the budget. What do you say, Tim? What's your your count and your general thoughts on your first watch.
I like Cyber seeing this at the theater as well on the big screen, and it was just epic. I mean, I've probably watched this movie close to a dozen times. I love this movie. It's one of my top favorite war films, but it's a hell of a roller coaster. I mean, it's it's a tribute to what those men did over there in Vietnam. I mean, the historical accuracy of this thing is probably about an 8 out of 10. I mean, it's pretty spot on. And and we spent, I spent a lot of my childhood, watching the Hollywood movies that, they pumped out a lot of World War II movies that really kind of galvanized the American patriotic spirit, against the evil Nazi enemy. And, once we step forward a couple decades, now you've got this new group of writers that are disenfranchised with this war and with our government and things like that. So now you're getting these war movies that are far removed from what we were used to seeing. And they're painted a lot of times with these really dark overtones, a lot of drug abuse, disciplinary things, chaotic instability, and just really reaching into the dark part of the human psyche. And they're just anything but accurate. A lot of times they're just almost angry films because of their disenfranchisement. And I think this one, again, it's a tribute to these soldiers. It really shows what war truly was like in Vietnam. It's not over exaggerated. It really puts you down on the battlefield hour by hour to see what our troops, did over there. And I think and it shows the sacrifices that they made and the hell that they had to go through while they were there. So I think this finally does Vietnam War and the Vietnam, soldier its credit. So it's just a magnificent film.
Okay, so before we break the movie down, Cyber, does the movie have any flaws?
I don't think so. I think that it paces itself well. I think that it tells the story very well, very accurately. And I think that they had a good proportion of, what the wives were going through along with what the soldiers were going through on the battlefield. So I thought that they did a good job of giving us a solid kind of equalization of each portion.
Okay, that's it. No, nothing else. No pacing issues. No, nothing.
No.
Okay. All right, Ben. Does the movie have any flaws?
I mean, as somebody who's also read the book, I mean, there's obviously some stuff left out, but I think that it was smart that they left that stuff out. But overall, no, not that I can think of. It's, like I said, very well paced, very well acted, very, very well written. And it just, I can't think of any off the top of my head or even from my last rewatch.
All right, Tim, flaws.
There's not a lot of flaws. I'm going to go right along with these two guys in this film. The pacing is excellent. It stays pretty true to the book mostly. I think there's only like towards the very end do we get a little bit more Hollywood and a little less accuracy in the book. But it does a wonderful job of not only, again, showing us what the soldiers were dealing with, but it does something that most Vietnam War films and even most war films don't. It shows us the family aspect, what's happening to the wives while their husbands are away at war and what they had to endure. And there's not a lot of films that really dive too deep into that, where this one does. It really brings that.
But is all that set up in the beginning of the movie before they actually shift to the battle? Is all that set up really well done and really like an asset to the film?
I think it is. I think because you got to set up that family dynamic and the family culture in order to bring that in later on again, as far as with the wives and the children are going through, especially more the wives, as this battle unfolds. And of course, tragedies befall these families as, soldiers fall on the battlefield. And the other thing this film does a good job too is it actually humanizes the Vietnamese a little bit. Normally they're just a bunch of people in pajamas that are like running towards you with AK-47 screaming, and it actually shows you them as more of a group of people that are equally fighting for their freedom on the battlefield. So not that, we could get into, where you sit on that kind of stuff, but I'm just saying it actually humanizes them and shows you a little bit of the flip side of the other side of the army.
I felt when I watched it on my watch, this is probably like, I don't know, my fifth or sixth or seventh watch or something like that tonight. I noticed that in that first segment before they lead up to the actual going to the battle, that there is a little bit of a drag there. Like, and some of the acting, honestly, I think the acting's good, Ben, but like, this isn't an ensemble cast of like, the best actors out there or whatever, like there's not a lot of standout secondary acting in that initial, build up. You know what I mean? So, that's just one thing. One little peeve I noticed was I felt like that part, I can see where somebody might feel like that part drags a little bit before it builds up towards the actual battle, where the movie really picks up. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I really wanted to go with that. But I unfortunately did not get to see this movie in the theater. But I saw it when it first came out in, I guess, 2002. I saw it, probably rented it, I think, probably from like whatever rental place I was renting from back then. And really enjoyed it and always have. I think it's a really great World War II. I think it's a really great Vietnam film. I think it's a really well done Vietnam film, like Tim said, that really like reflects a different side of Vietnam on film than like a lot of other Vietnam films. Just the pace of it, the tone of it. You know what I mean? The story. It's very different than what you typically see. With a lot of the different Vietnam films. I love that Mel Gibson is in this movie and he's not directing it. He's just the main actor. I like that part. Okay, so the way the movie starts off is plot-wise, according to Wikipedia, is in 1954, the French Army's Group Mobile 100 on patrol during the first Indochino War is ambushed by Viet Minh forces. Viet Minh commander Nguyen Hu An orders his soldiers to kill all they send, and they will stop coming. 11 years later, in 1965, the United States is fighting the Vietnam War. U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore is chosen to train and lead a battalion. After arriving in Vietnam, he learns that an American base has been attacked and is ordered to take his 400 men after the enemy and eliminate the North Vietnamese attackers. Now, they skip a lot of stuff that happens in between now and then that we can talk about, of course. Intelligence has no idea of the number of enemy troops. Moore leads a newly created air cavalry unit into the La Drang Valley. After landing, the soldiers capture a North Vietnamese scout and learn from him that the location that they were sent to is a base camp for the veteran North Vietnamese Army division of 4,000 men. So I'll stop there. Now, they cut through a lot there. They don't. That doesn't, mention the, the sort of all the scenes that we get with like, with Moore, with Hale Moore and his wife, and that introduction, the other wives are in there too. You know what I mean? You see them, there's scenes in between different secondary characters. For instance, when Moore meets like the lead helicopter guy, the guy Greg Kinnear plays, that's a pretty pivotal scene, I think. There's that. There's the whole scene where they have all the people lined up and they have the chopper fly by and Mel does his little speech, right? And I love one of the best secondary characters in the movie is Sam Elliott as his right hand man. He's he jumped into like 4 different countries of World War II or whatever. He had like this stellar track, like military track record or whatever. But so there was all that, right? and the training, them going through their cab training and all that transpires. And there's some interesting stuff that happens here and there, right? And they have that sort of like, gala or whatever event, like send-off event, and all that, right? You see like, Hal Moore with his children. You see one guy have his baby with his wife. I forget the name of the actor that has the baby with the cute wife, and so that leads up to where they do, go ahead and fly into the Ladrang Valley, and they do land and find out that they've got this 4,000 man, division right there on the mountain in front of them, right? So all that transpires. So I'll go to you first, Tim. What are your thoughts on that big section of film I just threw at you right there?
Oh man, that's a lot to unpack, but it's pretty interesting. I mean, we go back a little bit and we see the family dynamic and things like that. But what we're really seeing is, we're seeing them prepare to go to Vietnam, and we're watching, if we want to just jump past a little bit of that, the why we are in Vietnam speech by President Johnson, where he declares that we're going to go there, but he doesn't declare a state of emergency. So, at that point, Mel Gibson realizes, or not Mel Gibson, I guess that would be actually, Colonel Moore realizes that means that they can't retain a bunch of their soldiers because they can only do that if we're in a state of emergency. So he's going to lose a third of his men, and they're going to send him in to battle as the first air cav, because it's the first time we're going to see air cav, ever perform in a war theater. So basically, in untested tactics, they're bringing them in with brand new guns. So this is the first time the M16 is going to make its debut, and it's buggier than hell. It's got all kinds of problems because this was the gun of the future. It never needs to be cleaned or anything like that. And these guns were notorious for jamming because they had, they also changed the powder in the cartridges. So these guns would jam up, get gummed up and things like that. So they're horrific. They got a new pistol. They're using a new grenade launcher, and they're going to go in on helicopters that are going to act as gunships and troop transports. And to top that all off, so they're going to rename them the 7th Cav, which is got those serious, kind of doomed overtones of, that's Custer was the last guy that everybody remembers from the 7th Cav, and he was slaughtered, and he feels like they're setting him up to go into Vietnam to be slaughtered. But nonetheless, he's going to do his job, and he gives that speech to the men. He's like, look, we're all going to go. Some of us aren't going to make it, but I guarantee you this, I'll be the first one on the battlefield, and I'll be the last one that steps off of it, and we're all going to go home, live or dead. And the actual real Colonel Moore made that speech, and he did that, And so you see them fly in, to the zone, and they can only bring in so many men at a time. So what do we see? They're bringing in 60 guys at a crack, and I can't tell you what, but I wouldn't want to be the first 60 on the ground in a situation like that, having to wait for the rest of the guys, because it's going to take 3.5 hours to get the rest of that whole battalion down on the ground where you're right out in the open. So, and Colonel Moore, to his credit, he's a very astute man, very well studied. He starts guys running on the ground, sending them places and things like that. He's got a battle plan. He's really planning out what's going on, and what he's got happening too is each time helicopters going up, he's having to take pictures, bring them back, and he's meticulously making notes, and he's writing timestamps on them. So all the timestamps we see in the movie is timestamps that were actually on the photos that he was using for reconnaissance. So he very smartly uses his men, but they are very quickly already starting to be overrun because the Vietnamese are there's 4,000 of them sitting at that mountain. When they find that scout deserter guy, and he's like, look, there's like 4,000 guys up there that are going to just rain hell on you. He knows he's in trouble. So he's really got to know what's going on and plan. So to his, to his testament, he's very, very good at what he does, and he probably saves a lot of lives, even though they lose a lot of lives through this. And so the battle starts out, and it's just, it starts off, they all jumping off the choppers. There's not a lot going on, kind of like it happened with some of the Japanese stuff during World War II. And then once the Vietnamese kind of realize what's happening, they're like, we got to stop this before it starts, and they just start coming at him in waves, and it just breaks out from there and gets all kinds of ugly. So it's pretty interesting to watch how this unfolds, and how true to life everything that you see in this film, how it starts off. It's pretty damn accurate to, what you read the book according to what happened there between, the Moore and the writer Galloway.
That was Kerry Russell and Chris Klein was who I was talking about earlier, the actor and the actress that had the baby and all that, and they had that one scene where they're at the hospital or whatever, and Mel Gibson's character, you know, like goes up and they talk or whatever. Him and Chris Klein's character. Greg Kinnear was in the movie. Sam Elliott, Madeline Stowe, Barry Pepper, Mel Gibson, Greg Kinnear, like I mentioned, Sam Elliott. There you go. So Ben, what do you think, sir? What are your thoughts on that large section of that whole introduction, that whole like kind of introductory part of the film?
Oh man, that's like Tim said, that's a lot to unpack for me, especially like growing up in the military and currently serving. It's and having gone to airborne school at Fort Benning and being able to see where Colonel Moore gave that speech, where they were training, being in the same training areas as them. And then I think one of the most iconic scenes is where, you know, they're about to get on the bus and ship out. You see those towers in the back. Those are towers used to train airborne soldiers. Basically, what they're used for is to basically give you the feel of being dropped from 200 feet and learning how to land and stuff. And it's a good time. It's a good time. Love those towers. A lot of good memories there at Fort Benning. Now Fort Moore, named after Hal Moore now. But going back to the movie, sorry for that little tangent, but like it sets the tone for it again with the family dynamic, and being part of a military family is you're moving a lot, and they showed that you're moving a lot, you're getting settled, you're learning your surroundings. Excuse me. And you're getting acquainted with the new members of your unit. You're learning, like the wives get together, they create what's called a family readiness group, FRG, where they all get together and make sure that everybody's taken care of. And that whole dynamic's built out, and that's completely accurate. And then the train up, going through that kind of training. Basically, they're a brand new type of unit, Air Cav. They're the shock troops. They're going in. They're basically like how the airborne was in World War II. They're going in. They're going to take the fight directly to the enemy, and they got to train like that. And Colonel Moore and Sergeant Major Plumley, they do a very good job at doing that. And by the way, I love Sergeant Major Plumley. He reminds me of all the old crusty sergeant majors I grew up around in the military, and it's hysterical to watch that. And then the emotional part of leaving. As somebody who's gone away on a deployment or two, it like that hits home. You know, like you're leaving your wife, you're leaving your kids, and in some cases, a lot of them don't know if they're coming back, and it's really. But he puts his helmet on and walks down the road, doesn't look back because he knows he's got to do his duty to protect his family, to protect the freedom here, and do their job to the best of their ability. And then when they get there, they go through the whole thing, the intel, the brief, and it's just, and then going in there. What's really cool though, my dad was our field artillery officer, and one of the things that he would quiz me on for this part of the movie was when just before they start to land, you see artillery shooting at the landing zone at the LZ, and that's called prepping the LZ. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to disperse any sort of enemy forces within that area, and for them to catch that little detail and have that in the movie was pretty incredible in my opinion. And then they get on the ground, and like Tim said, Hal Moore studied his enemy. That's another thing too. Like you see in the Army with good leaders, they know history, they study and respect their enemies and potential enemies. You study what they do, where they've been, and then even your unit's history. you know your unit's history, you know where you came from, you know what you've done or what your unit's done, you know your heritage, and being able to use that in a tactical situation like you did on the LZ is pretty incredible. And they captured that again perfectly. Mel Gibson did a very good job at.
Yeah, they did a good job of expressing that he did like his research with it right there in the beginning of the movie of
Yep.
like of his enemy, you know, and then they played
yeah.
that out. They played that out through the battle.
Yep, because you would see him like saying they're going to try and flank us or they're going to try and go and cut us off
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
But and it's phenomenal. And my grandfather, he's also a Vietnam veteran. He said this movie was the most accurate that he's ever seen, and he actually got to meet Hal Moore in person at a reunion, and it was really neat. But yeah, no, the beginning all the way up to the beginning of the battle is phenomenal. They definitely set it up very well. I never noticed that lag, but I do agree with you. It does kind of get a little slow in that build up just before they launch off. But it's
a significant portion of the film, you
Yeah.
know, so it just kind of does it takes a while to kind of, you know, work its way up, you know what I mean?
Yep.
That's just one thing I noticed, but it's not, you know, not a big transgression against the film.
Well, and maybe the way they could have fixed that was if they would have focused a little bit more on the French, the French part of it, because it's very short, and most people don't understand the French history part of the Vietnam War before we get fully involved. So I think if they would have fleshed that out a little bit more, maybe you would appreciate it a little bit better.
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
those are my Jeff.
All right, Cyber, what are your thoughts, sir?
So, I mean, this tremendous amount of the film, really gets you into the kind of the behind the scenes of these families and kind of what they're leading up to and kind of their process in the Vietnam War. And so we get all these kind of introductions to these different characters, like Chris Klein, Kara Russell, Madeline Stowe, who I totally have forgotten was in this and playing Mel Gibson's wife. I had totally forgotten about her being in this, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Madeline Stowe. I haven't seen her in forever. She's great." And I just remember thinking, "Oh, she was fantastic as the wife." And then of course, I love the whole Ryan Hurst and what's his face? Sam Elliott, and when he's like trying to say hi to him in the morning, and he like say, "How would you know what kind of morning it is?" Absolutely cracks me up. I absolutely love that line. It's the two times that they showed it, was freaking hilarious.
And that's how those old crusty sergeant majors are too. But those are some of the best non-commissioned officers that you'll ever meet and that you'll ever have as leaders in the Army, and it's fantastic.
So I appreciate that great kind of like reality check there with that, and so I think it was really fantastically done. I just love that little that pushback from Sam Elliott. That's it. I think it's so funny, and the two times they kind of do it, and Ryan Hurst tried to just be so like happy about it. It was just so funny, but anyways. So, yeah, I feel that it starts off really well. I mean, it gives you kind of that brief French history at the very beginning of the film in 1954, about the French fighting the Viet Cong. And, you get kind of that little bit of history, but not too much, but just enough to say, hey, there was this battle that happened that kind of was the beginning of this whole Vietnam problem. And so having the French involved with this, I thought was kind of an interesting history lesson. And so I think that I like that it starts off with that to give us kind of that history. But then as the movie progresses, we go 11 years, because this is supposed to be 1954. Now it goes to 1965. And, this 1965 was kind of the real big hit for Vietnam. That's really when the war really started getting going and really included the United States. And so I think that it really gives us a really great depiction of kind of what these families were going through. Between the moving and between getting settled and then going right to, basic training and all this kind of stuff. I loved how they gave us that. And then they gave us those great introductions of those, different characters and stuff like that. And it's, it's very, humbling to see all these men, sacrifice themselves for this country. And, it's a very interesting retrospective showing, like, once again, going back to, I feel that these show what real men are. Those that are a part of any service of the military show that they really care about the country and they care about the, people of the United States. So I think that's really fantastically done too, giving us that great kind of interpretation at the beginning, giving us that great kind of insight into their lives, leading into them going to basic training and then, getting ready to go to war. And so, yeah, like everyone kind of mentioned the Chris Klein and Kara Russell's character. I think that was a very interesting, kind of family to talk about a little bit there. I thought that was kind of, really heartbreaking. And, but at the same time, I mean, so many soldiers didn't come back, in a lot of the different wars. So, unfortunately, this is just kind of one of the unfortunate casualties of how these, wars work. So, going into it, you kind of know that a little bit, but at the same time, you could feel the trueness of what's going on there. I love how Mel Gibson has kind of like the prayer talk with his daughter. I think that's absolutely funny. It's a great little like nod to his religion and everything, him being Catholic and all. But I think it was fun that he's like, you can pray how you would like, it's still praying. That's fine. And I think that's really fun, showing that kind of interactivity. But yeah, that speech he gives at the when they're getting ready to go into battle before getting ready to get their orders is a phenomenal speech that is so powerful and so well executed. I think Mel Gibson did a great job of presenting that and giving us that really solid interpretation of what the real Moore had said at that point back in 1965. And I think that everyone that was in it, the secondary characters, the kind of the front characters, all these great like character actors that were included in this, like Clark Gregg, being brought into this. I mean, Dylan Walsh from Nip Tuck. I was like, I forgot he was in this. I was like, holy crap. I mean, John Hamm, how young John Hamm looks in this, 23 years ago. I was like, holy crap, John Hamm. But I absolutely love Barry Pepper, and I think Barry Pepper was a great person to have in this. I mean, him just being in Saving Private Ryan a couple years prior, I think it was funny seeing him in this. Played a completely different type of soldier, but I think that it was fun to see him again. But I think it's a really solid start to the film, leading up to our breaking point, and I think it's just a really well executed film that even Moore himself, back when this came out in 2002, he himself was so happy with how well they wrote it to dictate how it really was like in Vietnam versus what the other Vietnam films had done up to that point. And unfortunately, 18% of their platoon was killed, which is so sad. But at the same time, I think that Moore and even Galloway at the time, when they did some commentary for the film, they mentioned how they were so pleased with how accurate this film was compared to any other Vietnam film. So I think that's a testament to showing how great this film is and what makes it such a fantastic film. So really great beginning to the film. Lots of exposition, lots of backstory, but I feel that it does it really well and it paces it very well.
Okay. So, upon arrival in the area with a platoon of soldiers, Second Lieutenant Henry Herrick spots another enemy scout and runs after him. Not a good move, because ordering his reluctant soldiers to follow, the scout lures them into an ambush, which results in several men being killed, including Herrick and his subordinates. The surviving platoon members are surrounded and cut off from the rest of the battalion. Sergeant Savage assumes command, calls in the artillery, and uses the cover of night to keep the Vietnamese from overrunning their defensive position. Meanwhile, with helicopters constantly dropping off units, Moore manages to secure weak points before the North Vietnamese can take advantage of them. The flanking maneuver that he anticipates, the creek bed, that he dispatches soldiers to take advantage of. despite being trapped and desperately outnumbered, the main U.S. force, Moore's force, manages to hold off the North Vietnamese with artillery, mortars, and helicopter airlifts of supplies and reinforcements. Eventually, Nguyen Huan, the commander of the North Vietnamese division, orders a large-scale attack on the American position. So I'll stop there, and I'll go to you first this time, Cyber. What do you think about the ambush scene, and then everything else that I just laid out there? Those really heavy action sections.
So, I mean, this is where the film really gets going. I mean, we get lots of action over in Vietnam here. We get some really great action sequences that just really depict very well, what, happened over there. And I think it was interesting just how screwed up this first mission was and how badly, it cost them so many of their troops. And so I think this depiction sequence here really gives you a great idea of kind of, what was it like in Vietnam. But I mean, the action sequences themselves were so well depicted because the blood, the explosions, all that stuff was all done so well, and just really played it out very well and made it very realistic. And I think that how the actors portrayed their characters, like even with majority of the deaths, I thought they did a really good job of acting like they were actually injured and how they died and stuff like that during during this time of warfare, versus how others would die throughout the years, because each war, unfortunately, we get better and better weapons that can cause more and more damage. So things escalate and change. So I think that for 1965, this shows a good depiction of how unfortunately a soldier would perish in their situation. But I liked how they did, they showed kind of depiction of how that the one platoon got separated from the rest of the platoon, and they have to fight off all those Viet Cong right up close and personal, trying to keep them off and stuff like that. The helicopter sequence in this section was so fantastic. Watching Greg Kinnear flying the helicopter and them coming back and forth, getting troops and stuff like that injured and stuff like that was done really well. I mean, that ambush was crazy. I mean, the fact that they landed right in the, this exact happened to be a location for the Viet Cong, and having 4,000 men there, you're just like, how did we not know that many people were there? Like, this just seems to be like such bad, bad scouting for the military, trying to figure this out. But of course, back in that time, they didn't have as much, technology as we do now. But still, at the same time, you think that they would have had a little better knowledge of what was going on in that area. But, great job by the Viet Cong, keeping themselves concealed and not being, not knowing that. And so we kind of get to see that too. We get to see kind of the other side with, the Vietnamese people and kind of how they're strategizing with their general and everything. And, we kind of see how their strategy is so much different than the United States. And so I think that was a great interpretation too in this sequence that gives us kind of that idea and kind of what they were dealing with, over in Vietnam and who the enemies that they were dealing with. But like, as Tim had mentioned, the use of the new weapons at that time, the guns getting jammed and stuff like that. I appreciated that they showed that. They showed that these guns were not all done so well, and that they had problems. And eventually we see, all the used guns on the ground, and they're trying to take ammo into the ones that actually work and stuff like that. So I think they do a good job of giving us that kind of that realism to what was going on at this time in 1965. Plus, also at this time in 2002, I really appreciated we got a film about Vietnam type of war versus, anything about World War II or anything about Civil War or even a current war or, something that happened in Desert Storm or something like that. It was nice to see something that went back to Vietnam, because I feel like there was a huge plethora of Vietnam films and then they stopped making them. So it was nice and refreshing to see something about Vietnam battle again to kind of give you a little better history of what those soldiers went through. So I think this is a really epic sequence. Lots of great battle sequences that just are done so well and gives you just a really great idea of just what they went through. Did we go as far as them starting to get letters for the dead?
No.
Okay.
We stopped there.
Okay. So great section. Really well done.
Okay. Ben, did you hear the part that I laid out?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
So this part is always interesting to me, especially with the ambush, because I mean,
Uh-oh. Ben, did we lose you, buddy? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Ben. All right. He sounds like he's there.
Yeah,
there he
I'm
is.
here. Sorry. Anyway, I'll have to go after this. Sorry, guys. But with the ambush, we started to have this character, this lieutenant. He was hard charger, you know, guts and glory. Wanted all the awards, all the accolades, that kind of thing. And his headstrongness got him into quite a bit of trouble with that ambush. Like he fell for the bait, took it, and got his whole platoon in a pretty big jam. Lost his platoon sergeant, and then the squad leaders, and all the way down to Sergeant Savage, who was a team leader. And then, but then also to Cyber's part, you were talking about like with the artillery support. That part was just like they depicted that phenomenally, using support by fire, effectively calling in the coordinates, and just seeing how accurate this artillery could be in order to hold them off. And that's all over the battlefield too. And like they're using fire maneuver and then also support by fire for effectively holding off the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. And yeah, this segment really demonstrates how, even though we're outnumbered, the United States military will hold its own, and we'll dig deep, we'll dig in, and we'll fight hard, and we'll continue to win at any cost.
Okay, brother. You said you got a dip?
Yeah, I gotta head out. I gotta help the wife with my son. So
all right, brother. Well, it was good seeing you, man.
Yeah, it's good seeing you guys. Love this movie. This movie's fantastic, and hope to get to talk to you guys again about it soon.
I hope so too, brother. Hopefully, we'll see you soon.
Yep.
All right. Middle-aged Tim.
So this is a very interesting part of the film because it's going to show a lot of things here. First, from the Vietnamese side, we're going to discover, this is a 20-year battle-hardened group or army. So these guys have fought the French for a long time, effectively fought the Japanese, then, even more than 20 years, fought the Japanese on their soil. Then they back to fighting the French, and they defeated them. And what they become is they're masters of underground warfare. So this is all new to the Americans. So what we're going to discover here is that, the Americans haven't fought a war since Korea, and they haven't fought a war like this. So they wholly weren't prepared for it. They didn't understand the people. They didn't understand the fighting style. It's all new. It's jungle fighting. It's not, open field, World War II, fighting through the fields and things like that. And, tank battles and things like that. This is gritty, one-on-one or, group on group warfare. And what the Vietnamese are going to do is they're using these ambushes and these battles. They're probing the Americans because this is their first encounter, first time they're going to fight the Americans. So they got to figure out, this is not the French. So let's see how the Americans fight, what they have, and how good they are with it. They discover right away their artillery is super accurate. So they know, okay, we don't want them to be able to pinpoint us with the artillery. So, one of the things they can do is get up close and personal with the men so that they can't drop artillery any longer, because if you're right up next to them, they're not going to take a chance at bombing their own people. So they're probing the lines to try to find openings. Luckily for our side, is Moore's pretty smart about the battlefield and how it's deployed, and knows where his weaknesses are, and is thinking very strategically on, like, if I was on the other side, how would I try to defeat the Americans? So he's thinking kind of like on a chessboard at this point. In the American side, we're seeing a very new and fresh and untested military, because again, as we pointed out in the beginning, a third of his army, because it wasn't declared a state of emergency, get to basically leave the military. So he's now doesn't have seasoned veterans anymore. He has very young officers that have no experience, and very, most of his men on the ground have not had any real practical experience in this. And so mistakes are going to be made. So it's Moore that's holding this together, because he's the one with the experience, and he has instilled in them during their training that, like, not only will you do your job, but you'll learn the job of the guy, below you. You're going to teach it to them, and everybody's going to know everybody else's job. And that helps, because that training's super important. But even at that, you got a few guys that are, again, they're looking for glory. And that, I think that guy that they pointed out, that we get Plumy, that's like, that guy always, he's down there. He's just interested in being a go-getter and stuff. I think that's the guy that we see that takes off, like, let's get that scout, let's capture him, which he should have never done. Any practical military person is going to know you don't go chasing somebody like that with your group, because bad things are going to happen. It does. They get cut off and ambushed, and they're stuck. And so even though we're still deploying men in the field and things are coming in, they're stuck, and it's going to be really hard to get them out of there, because they're just too far away, and the Viet Cong are just testing Moore's defenses at every turn. So to break out and get these guys is going to be really hard. And meanwhile, you have the helicopters coming in, dropping off as many supplies. You can't even get the medevacs to come in because they're too scared. So the guys who are dropping off supplies are like, put the wounded in ours. So they're dropping them in their net. So we got Snake that's trying to come in as much as he can to pick these guys up, and he gets several helicopters shot out from under him, which they don't depict in the film, but in the book it's talked about. And he was kind of a superstitious guy. So every time he had to change helicopters because his was too shot up, he'd make him take the snake doors off his helicopter and put him on the next one, because he felt like it was kind of a good luck charm or something. But so there's a point where he's like, look, we're not going to be able to come anymore tonight. And then we get into the night scenes where, again, the Viet Cong are going to probe. And what they're doing, we get those cool scenes where, like, look, I can smell them. The guy's like, yeah, they smell bad when they're dead. He's like, no, I can smell them. They're here. And so they call in some flares. And of course, when you see the flares pop, and you see the Viet Cong's like literally right on top of them. So those guys are, they're really working and probing hard to try to, get into the American defenses and defeat these guys. So it's a long, long, hard night for them. It's very interesting. And it's to Moore's credit that he's able to take this group of really green soldiers and keep them formidable and keep them from, just succumbing to the Viet Cong as a whole. And, because the guy that's on the other side, the one who's leading the Vietnam forces, we get to see him in real time too. And he's doing the same thing that Moore is doing. He's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come in here. We're going to split them here. We're going to go to the creek bed. So, we're also seeing he's not a stupid guy. He's a good tactician, and what he's got going. He knows the land. He knows all the resources that he has. He knows his men are hidden underground. They're very good at popping out of places and then disappearing. So he's just going to keep working them hard all night long and keep them from sleeping, which he does. These guys are not sleeping at all. So this is day one, and it's just these guys are on edge all the time, because they just have to stay alert, and because the fighting just never stops. There's lulls, and then it's fighting, lulls, fighting, lull, fighting. I mean, they just never know from what way it's going to come. So it's pretty interesting to watch how this unfolds.
Yeah, the ability for them to be able to call in the illumination is really neat. It is, that whole effect. It looks really cool on film whenever they do it, how it just immediately illuminates the whole dark, and you see all the Vietnamese in that one scene. Yeah, that's really, it's really great. That one unit that held out on their own, that got split away from the main force, they really fought their asses off, man. You know, because like they were surrounded from like every direction. You know, you got to give that guy credit that was ordering in all those mortar strikes. You know, the guy that stepped in to be the lead guy that was ordering in all those mortar strikes. You know, all around them to blow to keep the Vietnamese off them. You know what I mean? Like that. That takes a lot of skill, you know, to be able to like pull out a map and map out those coordinates like that, and then like radio that in. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And have it be accurate too, you know, and not blow yourself up on accident. You know what I'm saying? Which we see later on in the film, right? So one thing I think is interesting is that it is a true story that Plumlee, you know, the badass, you know, second in command guy, you know, in the film that Sam Elliott plays, did actually go to Galloway, the news guy, hand him an M16 and 3 mags of ammunition. And when Galloway said he was a photographer, a non-combatant, Plumlee told him, "Ain't no such thing, boy," and walked away. And also, when Galloway was hiding during like a barrage of you know, AK-47 fire and artillery, Plumlee kicked him in the back and said, "You can't take no pictures lying on the ground, sonny." So they did a really good job, you know, really like doing a good job of mimicking what Plumlee was really like. I found that very interesting. Okay, so basically where we left off was where back in the United States, Julianne Moore has become the leader of the American wives who live on the base. When the Army begins using taxi drivers to deliver telegrams that notify the next of kin of the soldiers' deaths, Julia takes over that responsibility along with the Carrie Russell character that helps her out. So that was, you know, obviously we'll talk about that in just a moment. But at the point of being overrun by the enemy, Moore orders First Lieutenant Charles Hastings, his forward air controller, to call in Broken Arrow, a call for all available combat aircraft to attack enemy positions, even those close to the U.S. troops' position, because they are being overrun. The aircraft attacked with bombs, napalm, and machine guns, killing many People's Army of Vietnam and Viet Cong troops. But a friendly fire incident also results in American deaths. The North Vietnamese attack is repelled, and the surviving soldiers of Herrick's cut-off platoon, including Savage, are rescued. That's where you actually see the Barry Pepper character shooting the gun and everything and fighting during the battle and all that, you know, which I thought was really great. What do you think, Cyber? What do you think of that section of the film? The wives assembling together, you know, Hal Moore's wife stepping up, and then the Broken Arrow call in to repel that major assault on the main landing area there at the battle.
All right, so this whole sequence is really emotional if you think about it. I mean, those two ladies taking the job of, you know, unfortunately reporting to all the different wives that their husbands have died. It's got to be god awful. It's got to be so horrible, because as we saw in that scene, the guy bringing the telegrams, like, he was like, I don't like this job. This is heartbreaking. And so that whole sequence is really emotional. Unfortunately, all these poor wives losing their husbands, and, you know, so young too. I mean, a lot of these guys were like early 20s, mid 20s. You know, I mean, it was, you know, very hard on them. So I can imagine how they depicted it was very accurate of how it really was. And it's too bad all these poor women lost their husbands. But, you know, going back to the battle, you know, once again, we get kind of, you know, some more kind of like reconnaissance showing kind of what the soldiers were doing at this time at night. And, you know, kind of, you know, seeing how they pretty much dealing with this whole situation through this whole ordeal, which the actual battle itself lasted 5 days. So what they show in the course of the film is supposed to be like 5 days worth. And so we get kind of that night sequence, which I thought was really fun and interesting to see kind of what they were having to do at night. And then leading up to them having to call in the broken arrow, which as soon as he said call in a broken arrow, first thing that came to mind was nukes. Nukes was the first thing I was thinking of, a bomb, a loose bomb. And, I think that was very clever on Moore's part, to call this in to get themselves some extra kind of backup, to get some bigger guns out there to help, with the situation. And so, we have more action sequences that are just, like I said, once again, crafted so well and done so well. And I think that whole situation was, taken care of very well, like how a great, strategic general or, person in charge of their division would do. And the fact that, I was thinking about it, going back to them having to change their name to the 7th Cavalry, totally made me think of like Civil War era. Like it didn't make me think of like 1960s like vibe, like a platoon or something like that. It totally made me think like cavalry, like, the whole references they make to Custard in this situation here, and how even, Moore makes these Custard references. And I just kind of crack up thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, they were really still thinking Civil War era. And I'm like, with the type of guns you have, you're nowhere in the Civil War era there, bros. But I think it's interesting how they changed the name of them to the 7th Cavalry when, we get those Custard references a lot. So I think I wonder if that was kind of like strategic on their part to change their name and stuff like that. So I kind of thought about that, in the sequence, thinking about that. But really solid, strong sequences that give us really lots of motion, lots of thinking, lots of battle sequences that are just well executed, that I think is just really entertaining. It's a very well done section.
Tim.
So I think Madeline Stowe, that Julie Moore character she played, she did a great job with this. Watching Julie Moore going out and taking over for the taxi driver, handing out the government condolence telegrams, because the government didn't think this out well. United States government, normally you would have soldiers coming in and notifying you of this, and they didn't. They just left it to a taxi cab driver, which is really just it's bad form. And to know that she has to go and tell these women that she knows that their husbands are dead, and at any moment she can pull one of those, because when they get those stacks of letters, she's like, look, we'll just pull them one at a time. So she doesn't know whether she's going to pull one for her own husband. She pulls one out, looks at it, probably is relieved, has to go up to one of these ladies' homes and inform them that their husband's dead, go through that a big emotional roller coaster, and then start the whole process over and over and over again. I mean, this is probably one of the most important scenes, and for me, it's almost one of the most heart-wrenching. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some horrific stuff that we see in this movie, and knowing that it's all pretty accurate based off of a true story, it makes it even worse. But this is the part that I just like really breaks my heart when I watch it, brings a tear to the eye. It's so hard to watch, and she does such a good job of it. And then moving back to the battlefield, I mean, again, basically the Vietnamese are they're done probing. They're having a hard time breaking the lines. So their leader decides, what do we have the most of? Men. We have lots of people. So they're just going to storm the line. They're just going to overwhelm, the Americans. That's their plan. They're just going to go in force. They're going to throw so many bodies at it that they can't possibly repel it. And they're just going to break the lines and kill the Americans to make a point, just like they did earlier with the French. Are like, don't leave any of them alive, because if you keep killing them, they'll stop sending them. So I think that's the message they want to try to hand to the Americans right away. And they do it. I mean, they come and you see the guys coming out of the ground. You see them grabbing their AKs or SKSs, and they're just flooding the field, and they're just coming in wave after wave after wave. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many bullets you have. You just can't pull the trigger fast enough to repel that when you only have a finite amount of men compared to the men that are coming at you. And so they finally do. They break the lines. But I think the one thing the Vietnamese didn't expect is that the Americans would call the broken arrow. They never thought they thought as long as we can get it among them, they're stuck. We'll be able to wipe them out. They never expected them to drop the ordnance right on top of them. And so that's what they do. When they call the broken arrow, that's a point where everybody who hears that command that's within radio distance of this, they stop whatever they're doing and they bring everything they have to bear on this one area. So every plane, whether it's a jet, a biplane, artillery, whatever it is, you're going to go and you're just going to pound this place into the ground, because if we're going to lose it, everybody's going to lose it, kind of thing. We've got to do something. So it's a Hail Mary kind of situation. And even though you're trying to call it in, because you watch that guy, he's calling it in and they're bringing it in, and it's getting ever closer and closer and closer. And he finally calls that one in, and the plane gets so close, you see those napalm canisters come off, and they're trying to call him off because they're like, no, you didn't hear us right. You got to stop. And he releases 2 of them, and we take some casualties, which is a horrific scene watching, some of our soldiers catch on fire with napalm. It's just horrible. And then the guy almost has a breakdown, and Moore has to look at him and says, son, that one's not on you. You're doing the best you can, but you got to keep doing it. So they have to keep calling in and getting it closer and closer and closer to them. So, and they break the Viet Cong, because they were not expecting this, and it really takes a toll on them. So it finally does stem the tide, but at a huge cost, to the men on both sides, and then the aftermath of that is them having to go out and try to find the men that were, it got in the direct line of these napalm bombings. And we see that scene where they go to grab that one Oriental soldier, and he goes to grab his legs and they just peel off. It's like, again, most of one of those heart-wrenching things you're ever going to see. And half his face is burned off. And I mean, it's just, that's what war is. I mean, and I think, people don't realize that when you watch a show and somebody gets shot and they fall to the ground. Here they're showing you, like, look, we're going to see this. You're going to see later on where somebody throws a phosphorus grenade and it gets into a guy's skin and burns him from the inside out. They're pulling out all the stops here to really show you what hell on earth is.
That happens in this part of the film where the guy takes the knife to go try to cut it out of the guy's face. Yeah. So I mean, it's just rough to watch, but that's how it really was. And I think, I think it's good that people see that, so they really understand what war is really about. I mean, as harsh as it is, and it's heart-wrenching to watch, but this is what these men went through. And I think it's good that people understand that, because I think it gives them a whole new appreciation for, our soldiers and what they go through to protect our country. Well, like Cyber said, I really like the Barry Pepper scenes. I think he was a great addition, to the film.
He was, yes. I
really enjoyed everything. All his scenes I thought were great. When they brought him into the film, he really added a lot. So Moore's troops regroup and secure the area. Nguyen Hu An plans a final assault on the Americans and sends most of his forces to carry out the attack. But Moore and his men overrun them and approach the enemy command center. Before the base camp guards can open fire, Major Bruce Snake Crandall and other helicopter gunships attack and destroy the remnants of the enemy force. With no more troops to call on, Hu An quickly orders the headquarters evacuated. Having achieved his objective, Moore returns to the helicopter landing zone to be picked up. Only after everyone, including the dead and wounded, is removed from the battlefield does he fly out of the valley. Sometime later, Nguyen Hu An and his men arrive on the battlefield to collect their dead. He claims that the Americans will think this was their victory, so this will become an American war. At the end of the film, it is revealed that the landing zone immediately reverted back to the North Vietnamese hands after the American troops were airlifted out. Hale Moore continued the battle in a different landing zone, and after nearly a year, he returned home safely to Juliet and his family. His superiors congratulate him for killing over 1,800 North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong soldiers. An older, now retired Moore visits the Vietnam War Memorial and looks at the names of the soldiers who fell at La Drang. And that is the end. So, Tim, what are your thoughts on that final passage of the film?
I think I think it's pretty interesting in the fact that, by this point, the Vietnamese commander knows, like, the Americans have taken a massive amount of casualties. They're out of ammo. They're out of water. They're not, they're having a hard time getting resupplied. So he knows he's got to do a final push, and he can probably take these guys out. And I like that scene, that moment where Moore looks at Plumey. He's like, I wonder if this is how Custer felt. And Plumey looks at him and says, well, the difference is, Custer was a pussy and you're not. So he's like, tell the men to get, deploy the rest of the ammo and tell the men to get ready. And what you feel like is going to happen is that they're all going to dig in and wait for this assault to come. But instead, the Americans do the exact opposite of what the Vietnamese are ready for, and they counterattack. Now, this is where the movie starts to take a little departure from reality, because they start going up that hill and you see the helicopters coming and they start wiping out all the Vietnamese. And from my understanding, that's not really how it happens. They call them like a B-52 and they do some bombings and some other stuff happens. And but they do finally overtake the rest of the Vietnamese and wipe them out. So it is a victory here as far as the Americans are concerned. But again, these guys are here because there's another battle going on further away that they were trying to relieve some of the pressure on that one. And the men that are involved in that battle, which are not part of the 7th, are almost practically wiped out. So it's kind of a stalemate, because although the Americans win here, they don't win over there. So the Vietnamese kind of look at that as like, you might have beat us here, but we beat you over there. And I think the other thing that this does is it shows the essential issues with the way the Vietnam War was fought. I mean, what you see here is it's not like a landing or an infiltration of Vietnam where the military is going to go in, they're going to establish a front, and they're going to move forward with battles as objectives are achieved. Instead, they're going to come in and they're going to do these like seek and destroy missions where they figure out where basically the North Vietnamese strongholds are at. They're going to come in mass, they're going to wipe them out, and then they're going to leave. And the problem with that is that, yes, they kill a lot of men, but again, in Vietnam, they've got plenty of people, because the Vietnamese, family culture, big families are really, looked upon as, very positive things. So much like the Catholics, they have very, very large families. So they have a lot of personnel over there. And so it doesn't matter, if you wipe these guys out and then you leave, they've just got a bunch more people that can come back in, and then they just reestablish themselves again. And that really causes a lot of problems, as far as trying to win this war, because now you're not winning like a war, like, again, World War II, where you're working a front. You're just doing hit and run tactics, and you're never really achieving anything. And that's where the downfall of this war really, I think, stems a lot from, is because they didn't do it as a frontal war, but as a hit and run kind of war.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that covers this part of it pretty good.
Okay. Cyber.
So the conclusion of the film is really powerful, I think. That final battle that we get to see, at the end here, showing kind of all the final outcome of, unfortunately, this first outing for them in Vietnam. Unfortunately, this battle itself actually did not happen. This was a little bit of the story that they kind of created a little bit, because they did not make a final push like this, like they did in the film. But they did have some kind of battles that were kind of similar. But I think that this is a really powerful sequence, especially after, they're picking up all the dead and stuff like that. Him seeing Chris Klein dead and him and his emotions and stuff like that, I think is really interesting. How emotional he gets at the end more. And I thought Mel Gibson did such a great job of bringing that to life, giving us that real authentic, like, you really felt like he was sad, like he felt bad for these men, and that, he understood what it was like to have a family and, have the unfortunate task of, losing a loved one and stuff like that. So I think he did a really good job here at the end. And then just how his look and everything as he's getting on the helicopter at the end after everyone has gotten lifted out and stuff like that was just so powerful as well. And then having that great kind of voiceover that we get to see. I mean, even seeing like Barry Pepper's emotional kind of journey as he's trying to write the book, about this account. I think he did a phenomenal job too, as well. As you had mentioned, and I have mentioned earlier, I thought Barry Pepper was such a great addition to this film. And, we get that great memorial scene there where he's supposed to be older and checking out the wall, at where all the fallen soldiers have been and have their names put it on. And I love that shot because it shows you how many people have sacrificed their lives for this country. And it's amazing that these men did that for us to have the freedoms we do. And so I think that is really amazing. Just, getting to see that wall all the time, unfortunately all those, unnecessary deaths too, as well. At the same time, it's very sad as well, thinking that all these poor men will never get to see their children grow up, all this kind of stuff. So it's a very emotional ending. I feel it gets you really good. It really gives you a perspective of what a soldier goes through. And hence that term, We Were Soldiers, I think is a fantastic title that really brings that together. And I think it's a very solid ending that gives us this really great kind of, story of this, real history, of Vietnam. So really powerful ending, very strong. And I think it's very done well.
Okay. Well, and I certainly love the movie. I think it's it definitely portrays Vietnam in a really different way than most Vietnam films have before in the past, really. I think that's great. How accurate it really is, I don't know, but I'm sure there's probably a middle ground somewhere, somewhere between this type of version of a Vietnam film and things like Platoon, for instance, or whatever. I'll tell you what, guys, I'll rate this one a 9 out of 10. Tim, what's your rating?
Oh yeah, easily 9.5 out of 10 for sure.
Okay, Cyber?
I give it a 10. 10. It's just a fantastic war film. Entertains you. Great acting, great story, great special effects. A 10.
There you go, folks. And that is our review of We Were Soldiers 2002. We really appreciate everybody out there that supports the MCU'S Video YouTube channel podcast. Hope you enjoyed our review. I certainly enjoyed it. Hopefully you gentlemen did as well. In the meantime, we're going to plug our way out of here and call this one an evening. So I'll start off with you, Tim. You can go ahead and tell us what's going on over at MAM Reviews, Middle Age Movie Reviews.
All right. Well, you can find me at the Middle Age Movie Reviews podcast, where I and my two podcasting partners, Matt and Joey, discuss movies from the book of 1,001 Movies You Should Watch Before You Die. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So if you've enjoyed this review, We Were Soldiers, then swing on over and check out our reviews of Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket if you need a little bit more Vietnam movies in your life. Otherwise, upcoming, we're going to start posting new podcasts starting this Saturday. I believe we have, there's something about Mary coming out. We also have Groundhog Day. And we're going to take a little step away from the 1001 book, and we're going to do a episode of just guilty pleasures, movies that we like watching that maybe the rest of the world either doesn't know about or doesn't care about as much as we do. So that should be a fun show as well. And, if you come over, you also get to hear quite often our friends over here at the MCU join us, Cyber, Andres, the pop culture guy, and Jeff S.
There you go. Okay. Cyberneticshark, sir. Let me switch over to you, and there you are, my friend.
All right, folks. So, as usual, if you enjoy me here on the panel or as a moderator on the MCU's Bleeding Edge, you can check out my solo content. You can find me under Cyberneticshark. Find me on YouTube, TikTok, X, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon. As you can see there, my most recent trailer reaction is for the upcoming Karate Kid Legends. Looks like it's going to be a fabulous film. If you have not seen the trailer, check out my trailer reaction there. It's really fun. Also, my most recent review, of course, is for the Disney film Moana 2. If you haven't seen that, check out that review as well. I'll be having more stuff up for you guys soon, more wonderful shorts and more reviews and trailers. My best and worst of 2024 reviews up here soon for you guys. Have them filmed, just need to edit and put them up for you guys. Went and saw the movie Flight Risk tonight. Really enjoyable film, directed by Mel Gibson. And starring Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Mr. Mark Wahlberg. You can check him out in that. Just came out today. Really great film. Enjoyed it. And you can check out my mini review of it there. I'll be having a review of that up eventually too for you guys. But yeah, I'll be having more stuff for you guys. And as always, thank you for watching us here on the MCU'S Legion. Keep on watching, keep on subscribing, and telling people about us. And as well, as always, my solo content for me and Mr. Andres as well. And we appreciate you guys.
Most definitely. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend, and a great next week. God bless you. God bless Donald Trump. And God bless you, Cyber. God bless you, Tim. Love you guys. Good show. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Thanks, man.